I have something very exciting to share with all of you today. Two things, actually. Number one, we all know that the think tank is for all of us to kind of collaborate and throw our ideas together as attorney entrepreneurs. Half of it is obviously the practice of law, the other half is obviously business. And, with all the resources we have available in JHQ, none of us really need to reinvent the wheel, right? So that was the whole purpose of this. And then I decided to switch it up a little bit, make it more of kind of an interview format. We've got so much talent in JHQ and so much knowledge that we can really be sharing with everybody. That's why I reached out to Bob and Max. And for those of you, I know a lot of you don't know me, but for those of you who do, you know that I'm actually a natural born introvert. Like, don't call me if whatever you can be said in a text. If you call me, it should be no longer than 5 minutes, or I will mentally check out on you. You won't know it, but I don't get anything you say after 5 minutes. I spoke to Jake Finkel last week for an hour and 15 minutes. That is probably a lifetime record for me. And I got off the phone feeling so incredibly energized and so freaking pumped to have this guy come and talk about his journey with you. I was very surprised to learn that there was a lot about him that is so untraditional, but man, this guy knows his shit. And I'm so excited to have him come and share it with you. So Jake, if you wouldn't mind, can you start by going back to your law school journey and then what you did right after law school and how you got started? Because that was seriously motivating to me, and I'm hoping that it gives at least a couple other people the same kind of fire it gave me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Ashley. And
Hi.
I was equally juiced and motivated after we got off our call last week, after that hour and 15 minutes, because I think you're super interesting and super inspiring.
Thank
And I
you.
think that's cool. That's something that we can do for each other, right? We can motivate each other and inspire each other. So I went to UCLA Law School. I graduated. I passed the bar, and I did not practice law for like the first year that after I graduated and passed the bar. I did something unrelated to law, which was I started a talent agency company with my friend, and it was cool. Like we did some business, we managed some talent, but I quickly learned that it wasn't for me. And I remember one New Year's, I think it was 2014 going on 2015. I had this epiphany that I needed to be a lawyer. That, that's the reason why I was inspired to be a lawyer when I was in high school. It got reconfirmed when I was in college. And, I saw the path when I was in law school. And I had an epiphany that not only do I need to be a lawyer, I need to be a trial lawyer. Because I really liked, giving speeches, speaking in public. I was raised by an immigrant family where, we sat around the table and everybody had to give a toast with a shot of vodka. That's how I was raised. So I didn't know what to do though, because I didn't have much experience working in law. And so I didn't know whether I should start my own practice, because that's what I wanted to do. That was an entrepreneurial side of me, which is I want to have my own practice. I want to have my own law firm. But should I work somewhere first and learn on someone else's dime while I learn how to practice law and be an attorney? So I reached out to a couple of attorneys. I joined Cala's new lawyer listserv, and the one post I saw was, hey, there's this attorney, Robert Simon, trying a case in Van Nuys, and I was like, hey, that's a great idea. I'm gonna watch trial lawyers in court try cases, and that's how I'm gonna learn. That's where I'm gonna get my education. So I went to see Robert Simon try a case. I was only there for half an hour or something. They broke for lunch and I had to leave. And I saw Bob cross-examine somebody, and I was like, if this guy can do this, I think I can do this. Like, not knowing who Bob Simon was or anything like that, only seeing him ask like maybe 10, 15 questions that to me seemed relatively unremarkable, to be honest. So I emailed Bob. He said, hey, come on down to my office. I'm on the beach. I chatted with him for like 2 hours. I was like, wow, this guy is so awesome and so cool. And he ended up telling me, hey, we got like a $2.6 million verdict in that case that you watched. And I was like, wait, what? Like if you know, I feel like I can do that. I also knew that Gary Dordick was a big name in plaintiff's work, and I emailed him and cold called his office, arranged for a lunch with him, and he was so nice enough to give me his time. I was a nobody. I'm still a nobody, and we went out to lunch. And what inspired me from that lunch was I asked him. I said, "Look, I want to start my own practice one day," and he said, but I don't know what I'm doing. What do you recommend I do?" And he said, if you believe you have the ability to get your own cases, you should start your own practice. And it was, ignorance was bliss. I didn't know any better. And I said, hey, I think I needed to hear that. I started my own practice in May or June of 2015. I leased like this small, shitty 400 square foot office in a shitty building in Koreatown because my friend was a tenant there. And I bought a desk from IKEA, and that's where my journey to build my practice really started.
Okay. I forgot to tell everybody why I was even in Santa Ana. I was so excited about this interview, I forgot to mention it. So Jake, hold that thought, because you said something and I want to touch on it. But
Sure.
The reason, the second exciting thing, guys, is that I've gotten so much good stuff from Think Tank that I wanted a way to memorialize this so that people who are not here can get it later, and also people who were here who might have missed something can go back and get it later, namely myself. So we decided to put it on a YouTube channel. Jake is our pilot guest. So as soon as I can find a super techie teenager to set this shit up for me, I'm gonna post it and give everybody the link so that they can tune in. And then as we have the guests come on, you guys are obviously welcome to post this to your social media, whatever. Jake, you mentioned that you were reaching out to the big shots, right? About their trial experience and everything, and you said, you're a nobody. You're still a nobody. I'm going to stop you right there because you will not talk about my friend like that. Because when I saw your website, that was so well done and so professional. And what I noticed also on your website, you have a lot of female employees. Is there a reason for that?
Look, I do a lot of employment law now, and I'm all about fairness and equality. And I even, to be honest, I have really engaging intellectual conversations about, the workplace and fairness and discrimination with a lot of my, friends who have their own businesses. I mean, there's no specific reasons, but, I one thing that I've worked on in the last 5.5, 6 years is how to hire, how to develop talent, how to find the right fit for my firm and my business. And so a lot of it is just organic, natural growth. And, I just like working with people. I think that picture on my website's a little outdated. I think we're like twice the size now. But there's no specific reason. I just look for people that I connect with and vibe with, and people that will be a good fit and help build the chemistry of my firm. That's all I could say. And another thing that I wanted to say, Ashley, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. You are such a natural, I told you this on the phone, you are such a natural talker and interviewer, because you're so curious about the people that you interview that it makes it very natural and organic. And we were on the phone. I was like, you got to take advantage of this, which is probably what makes you a really good lawyer and a really good trial lawyer. Like, you're like a natural born interviewer. We want to call it podcast host or whatever. Like, you're very, very good at this. Very good at this.
So I'm down with the Love Fest all day long. I appreciate that. But you also mentioned something else that resonates very deeply with me, and that is that when you went to law school, you set your sights on being a trial lawyer. And I think that there are, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I think it is in your blood. There are lawyers, and then there are trial lawyers. Did you know from day one which one you are?
Great question. So when I started practicing, I started my practice, the goal was to become a trial lawyer. One of the first things that I did was I did CALA's Plaintiffs Trial Academy. This was in 2015. There was a lot of people in that class that I developed real bonds and friendships with, and people that I learned from. Because remember, I didn't work anywhere. I mean, I worked for a plaintiff's firm when I was in law school, but it didn't do anything that I'm doing now. Um, so I had my sights set on becoming a trial lawyer. A couple of months after that, I tried my first case. It was still one of the highlights of my short career, where we got a verdict, a very, very modest verdict. It was like $12,000, but there was a high associated, unlike a lot of highs that I had, both natural and unnatural in my life. But what happened, Ashley, was that as I was building and growing my firm, I actually fell in love with the business of the practice of law more than the practice of law. And at some point, I had to make this is something I still struggle with today, right? Because, people who have their own practices, they might have to wear two hats at once, which is, the business person, the owner, the manager, and also practicing law, being the lawyer, taking the depositions, managing the caseload, stuff like that. So that's something that I struggle with. But at some point, I realized that I just personally think what's best for me and my firm and my business is for me to focus on the actual business and on the growth and on the marketing and on the hiring and on the management, as opposed to completely dedicating myself to be a trial lawyer. So I had to make the decision relatively soon, after I started my practice, and that's what just felt more natural for me.
Okay, that's so beautiful, because that's kind of where I wanted to segue into, right? Have you read The E-Myth Attorney?
I have not read The E-Myth Attorney. I'm not.
Okay, so I'm in this book, and one thing that these authors, they're two estate planning attorneys in San Diego. One thing that they really drive home hard is this concept that a lot of lawyers treat their firms as the jobs they work in rather than a business. And that is something that, as a new business owner, for lack of a better word, I struggle with. And what they're saying is that when you own your own firm, you have to work on the business, not in the business, even as an attorney. I know you know something about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you froze up for a little bit, but I think I get the gist of it. Look, I mean, I think there's a lot of really, really, really exceptional attorneys who try to start their own practices and have their own practices and just can't make it because you've got to have some business sense. You've got to focus on your business. And vice versa, I think there's incredible business people who happen to be lawyers. They got their law degree and they've built really successful law firms without having to practice, because they made the decision kind of like I kind of did. I do practice a lot of law, but I think they made the decisions like I'm gonna treat my business as a business and focus on the growth and focus on the P&Ls and all that business stuff. So for a lot of people, I think they need to, and this is something we talked about last week, I think you need to be self-aware about who you are, what's your identity as a attorney in the plaintiff's world, and what's your firm's identity as well. right? Is it exactly mirror you, or is it a little bit different? So I think a lot of people can take a shortcut in succeeding by maybe even partnering up or making that decision, like I'm going all in the direction of business, or I'm going fully in the direction of being a trial lawyer. But now you need to reverse engineer that and say, hey, if I'm going to be a trial lawyer, I either need a partner who's going to handle the business, or I need an office manager, or kind of like Max Lee has the director of operations, or like I don't like to speak about other firms because I don't know the nuances, but like Brad and Bob were able to build one of the most successful firms ever, right? Some of the firms that we know about, there's somebody there handling the operations and the growth, where there's the face of the firm might be the trial lawyer. So I think everybody like who starts their journey, they need to be self-aware of what they want to actually do, because that'll make them happier and more successful.
Okay, so when you mentioned that you got out of law school, started this other business venture, and then decided to return to the law,
Sure.
You decided to come out of the gate, open your own shingle. You had no law firm experience. How did you get clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. I networked. I network with a lot of attorneys, and I just kind of put myself out there. Someone like Bob was really nice enough to send me a lot of, or a decent amount of cases when I first started out. Him and both Eric, who is you guys see on the chat, he's on Slack. Eric is awesome and a good friend of mine till this day. But I networked with attorneys like Bob Simon, other attorneys. I started practicing both personal injury and employment early on. So I realized that workers' comp attorneys were a good referral source for me because they handled a lot of cases that had the employment overlap, so I could get cases from them. So I just kind of put myself out there. I reached out to people. I took people out. I spent a lot of my first year and a half or so just kind of working on business development and case acquisition. And so that's kind of how I started getting cases. And then what I knew or heard or learned or discovered, which is your own clients can be a really good referral source for future business. And so what does that mean? That means that you have to treat every single client like a potential referral source. As a referral source, and just give them the utmost best service possible. And I knew from the beginning, maybe I didn't know everything there was about the law, but I knew that I could call the clients, give them the updates, really impress them in that first initial face-to-face contact, spend some time with them. And I think Brett kind of mentioned this last week when Max was talking, and this is kind of the recipe for some of Max's success too, is give the client all that you got, right? What they care less about having maybe the best attorney ever, more so than they care about having somebody who's going to bust their ass for them and treat them well, with respect, with dignity, and give them the best results they can. Like I have clients that I've gotten very modest settlements for, sub 10,000, sub 20,000, that just had the best experience ever because either me or somebody in my office just took really good care of them throughout the case.
All right. Now you got cases coming in, and you got those cases coming in because you networked your ass off, right?
Correct.
Made good contacts, built relationships. Now you're working in the capacity of a lawyer, and you start realizing, even though you still have to perform legal tasks, you like the business aspect of it. Now you're focused on scaling up your practice, right?
Correct.
What do you do?
Look, Ashley, it's still, I've had my practice for 5.5, almost 6 years, and it's still a challenge for me. And I think it's important for other people to hear that, right? Because I've essentially been alone. And, I never had any partners. I never worked anywhere. I've made incredible relationships, have incredible friends. Calla was a good resource. JHQ is now becoming an unbelievable resource. But I still struggle with a lot of things in this business. And one thing that you told me when we jumped on a call last week was, hey, I looked you up, Jake. and you are developed. And the way you said it was kind of funny to me. And
it's all relative,
what
though, isn't it? Isn't it all relative?
It's all relative. But
you were like, I only have 16 employees, and I was like,
yeah.
Right.
So, but what I want to say is that I am still developing. I am not developed, and I'm sure that there's firms and attorneys that are kind of a couple of levels above me that'll say the same thing, because we encounter different challenges at different stages of our businesses, right? So I still struggle with wearing the lawyer hat and wearing the business hat, because again, I'm doing this I have an incredible team now, but as far as like the growth and development, I'm doing it on my own, and I'm running my own cases. So what I did once I started networking and getting my cases, one of the first things that I had to do was hire an employee, because I was getting a lot of Spanish speaking clients, and now I definitely dabble in Spanish, but I was not very good at Spanish then. So I quickly realized I need somebody full time in house who speaks Spanish. So I hired somebody, and one of the things that I learned early on was you got to reinvest all of your money, or as much money as you can, in your business, okay, in your practice, and that's what I did, right? Fortunately for me, I was 28 years old at the time. I didn't have a lot of financial responsibilities. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife at the time. I try to keep my living expenses very modest, and the idea was that with every dollar I made, I would put 90 cents or 95 cents back into the business, okay? The reason why is because I knew I wanted to grow. And when you think about our business, there's a lot of costs coming from you at different angles, especially when you want to grow. You have your fixed overhead and rent. You have your labor and your employees. 3 months in, I already had one employee, so I was looking at having a payroll every 2 weeks. You also have you have cases for your cost cases, right? Meaning that we all do plaintiff's work, right? So every case costs money, right? If you're litigating a case, even in pre-lit is a lot more modest, but you may have to have $50 to $100 in pre-lit for that case. But if you're litigating cases, the cost of your case is something that you have to come up with, right? We're advancing the money for our clients for the costs. So if you can't come up with $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for the cost of your cases, you have a problem, right? Not only right, Brad said it's an interest-free loan to the clients, which they're lucky that we're doing this, but we're also doing this because we get our 40% on the back end, right? So you have so many costs, and another cost that you have is marketing. So after I started getting my clients through networking with the attorneys, right, I realized that I need to put myself out there and market to get cases for two reasons. One is you want to build a brand, right? You want to build a brand, digitally speaking, socially speaking. And two is your acquisition costs for cases will be less if you market the right way versus paying a referral fee on the back end, right? Referral fees are great. A lot of us make a lot of money paying referral fees. I accept referral fees all day long. I love referring cases to people. I love working with other attorneys, which I do, like Max said last week. One of my buddies, Max, we work on a lot of cases together. But when you compare that to the acquisition cost of the case, you're actually spending way more paying a referral fee than you would by spending money on marketing when you figure out how much your marketing budget is versus how many cases you're signing up. So you have a lot of costs in the law firm business, and that's why I actually, in the very beginning, I was reinvesting everything, and I'm still trying to do that as much as I can. It's a lot harder now. I'm married now, so having a wife is interesting. You want to kind of level up at certain stages of your life. I got a baby on the way due in January. I got a lot of baby stuff to buy.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So thanks, Brad. And so, but I'm looking back at it now. You have to have the discipline, and I still have to have the discipline, right, to be able to reinvest because I'm not done growing. So you have to have the discipline to reinvest the money that you're making into your practice.
So let me pause you right there, because a couple people have some questions. One, I want to go back to Krista's question.
Sure.
Krista mentioned, hold up. I don't trust people with my firm's business because we have been burned a couple of times. How do I get past this? And she said she got burned and ripped off to firm administrators in a row. People she thought she could trust. What would you say to that?
That's an interesting point, and I agree with her. I don't trust anybody with my business. I've seen a lot of people grow really fast because there was 2 partners or 3 partners, and they were able to scale because there was 3 people working on the growth of the firm, or somebody was doing one thing, the other person was doing something else. But I never found a partner that I felt like could add enough value where I would give up equity in my firm. Okay, and maybe that's stifled my growth, right? Maybe I would have been 2 times the size I am now if I did have at least 1 partner or something like that, right? So I totally get, Krista, I totally get your reluctancy and hesitation. I think it's really tough. I mean, I talked about this with Ashley. If you're partnering up with somebody, I mean, that's way more serious than a marriage. I mean, you're spending 10, 11, 12 hours, 13 hours a day with this person, and if it's the wrong fit, it could be catastrophic to your business. People have the firms have dissolved because of these issues, right? So you got to be really careful. I think you got to kind of identify, who are you, right? I've identified I am the business person, okay? And because I've identified I am the business person, right, what I realized was that if I'm not going to give up equity to somebody to handle the legal, I need to have employees. I need to hire attorneys, okay? So to me, it was kind of a no-brainer to be like, if I'm going to focus on the business, I'm going to focus on marketing, case acquisition, management, and growth. I need to have attorneys and staff to run these cases, right? If you want to be the attorney and have somebody, like me or Brett Sachs or somebody else do the growth, the development, and something like that, it's tough. You got to find the right person. I personally don't have any advice on how to do that because I've never done that. But the one thing that would intrigue me is to look for people outside of law. I think a lot of people are used to kind of this like incestual legal community to find people to work with. But I would go on LinkedIn, I would jump on like Facebook, I would just do a lot of research and find somebody who's good at business development and maybe put them on payroll, and if that person is right for you, give it a trial run, but try to look for someone outside of law, because the thing is I don't think, generally speaking, I don't think lawyers make really good business people. There's just something about the way that we're trained and we're educated to really minimize and avoid risk, right? And so a lot of attorneys are trained to come out of law school and are very narrowly focused, right? So that's why if I were to do what Crystal wants to do, I would look at other areas, find success rates that they had working in different industries and different businesses, and see if they're interested and intrigued in helping me grow my legal business, because the concepts of business are completely transferable. I think you're actually even better off to have a business person or somebody you hire in-house and put them on payroll that almost doesn't know anything about law, right? They don't need to worry about that. You worry about the law, they can worry about the growth.
So let's break down, and that's great advice. But I want to break down when you were talking about reinvesting your money into your firm, because I have heard that many, many times, but nobody wants to give the formula on what you should be reinvesting in, right? And you mentioned 2 things. You mentioned building a brand and acquisition costs. So when you're talking about building the brand, you're talking about marketing, right?
I'm talking about, I think there's 2 types. There's brand building and then there is marketing, right? I think that they can be viewed very differently.
Okay.
Building a brand can be something that a lot of lawyers already kind of organically and naturally do. Like you, Ashley, if you're gonna do these videos and these interviews with attorneys and post them on YouTube or whatever it is, right? You're branding yourself by doing that.
That's your
right?
fault, Jake.
Well, I just
Because you kind of gangstered me on that phone call, and you're like, "What are you doing?" And then the wheels started turning, and I was like, "Oh shit! I feel a YouTube channel coming on." That's your fault.
Right. That's why you're going to give me 15% equity in your firm. But you doing this is you putting out content, and by you putting out content, you're building a brand, right? Now, I think that is a form of marketing for sure. But the way I look at it is there's brand building, and then there's actual, paid marketing or organic.
Okay, so when
marketing.
you were talking about brand building, how did you take the money you got from your cases and invest it back into building Jake Finkel's brand?
Okay, so I want to do both kind of at the same time. Not that the recipe I have is like a formula to success that everybody should follow, because I'm still trying to figure this shit out. It's not easy, and because I'm doing so many things at once, like I haven't completely kind of dedicated myself to really figuring it out. But I knew I needed to be on Facebook. I knew I needed to spend money on Facebook. I knew I needed to have a Yelp presence, okay? I knew I needed to spend some money on Yelp to have that presence. I knew I needed to be on Instagram, okay? I knew that, I needed to put out content and start a blog. And with the content on my blog, I wanted to funnel people from all the social media websites and have it go to my blog so I could add value and then track the people who read the stuff, right? I knew I wanted to do Google AdWords, right? And so I was focused more so, to be honest, I was focusing more so on the marketing, on paying for marketing, on getting cases, on signing up cases, that I was focusing on branding. If I were to start all over, or maybe this is a goal of mine for 2021, I would focus way more on branding, because when people see a name on a billboard, or when they see a name on Google results, right, they're going to be also looking for a social proof, right? What that means is, what does your Instagram look like? What does your TikTok look like? What does your Facebook profile look like? How are people reviewing you on Yelp, right? It's not good enough anymore to just show up on the first page of Google, right? You need to have a built-out culture and identity on digital platforms like Instagram, TikTok. Some people are on Twitter, on Facebook, on Yelp, right? So I think you need to have the branding there. And so I invest mostly on paid marketing. Let's go on Facebook. Let's spend money on Facebook.
When you say paid marketing, you're talking about the Yelp, Instagram, Google Ads, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
And the reason I'm asking you that is because there was another question about you investing in pay-per-click ads and how profitable that's been for you, because there's an argument that's been made that it might be more profitable for employment law attorneys versus personal injury because it is very expensive.
Yeah, so I do Google AdWords, I don't do pay-per-click, and I don't do it for personal injury. So just to give you a little bit more background here is that I do both personal injury and employment.
Right.
And I was doing kind of both at the same time. And then somewhere around late 2018, even the beginning of 2019, and by the way, I was really kind of just saving up money, reinvesting, building slowly for a good 3.5, 4 years before I made a really big push to develop and grow my firm. And it's grown exponentially in the last year, really. I was.
Do you attribute the growth to you saving the money and then reinvesting that money in advertising?
If I didn't know that philosophy of reinvest your money in your own business, I mean, I would be driving all kinds of fancy cars. You know what I mean? Like, not that I was killing it by any point, but I would have done stupid stuff. So I'm lucky that I came across that advice, when I was, 27, 28 years old,
Okay.
about 5, 6 years ago, right? So 6 years ago. So the question, what was the question?
What is the return on investment for the paid advertising that you've done? That's what people are curious
But
about.
what I wanted to say was that I remember what I wanted to say.
Okay.
I realized quickly that I was doing much better in employment than I was in PI.
All right.
Maybe the reason for that is the saturation of PI versus employment.
Right.
And I think a lot of that had to do with how much cheaper it was for me to advertise for employment than it was on PI, right? So
it is cheaper to advertise for employment than it is for personal injury.
If I wanted to compete with the big dogs on like Google AdWords or pay-per-click or anything like that, I wouldn't be able to. I just don't have that kind of a bankroll to do it, right?
Okay.
And so that's why I realized that employment was a better practice area for me to get into and to grow my business and to grow my firm around employment than PI. Because PI case acquisition costs is, I could talk. You go have a separate conversation about the differences between employment and PI. But for me, it made a lot more sense, economically speaking, to put all my eggs in the employment basket. I still do PI. I still do a lot of PI, but to me, it made more sense. The ROI, I mean, it was the thing we talked about, Ashley, right? Whatever that's, I'm going to butcher the saying, but like,
okay.
I don't know which part of my marketing is working, but something is happening.
Okay.
Like for me, I'd rather just actually do it. And then, make sure that I'm signing up the cases, make sure it's making sense kind of at a quick glance. And then when the revenue starts coming in, right, for my 2019 spend or my early 2020 spend, then I want to see what do I need to tweak and adjust, right? I'm making sure I need to make sure I'm not making any mistakes. But for me to sit there every single day and be like, okay, is this marketing working? Is that marketing working? No, I need to have a good sample size before I could really make a decision. And as long as the cases are coming in and I'm not spending too much on it, then, I think I'm doing well.
Okay. So when you reinvested the money in your firm, you reinvested in case acquisition costs. And
Sure.
For 2021, you're going to be working on stronger ways to build your brand, right?
Sure.
Is the idea that building your brand and having that presence, is that going to take over for some of the advertisement costs that you've invested?
No, not necessarily, because I think you could build brand for next to nothing. And by that I mean just being on Instagram. Like if you're a young new firm, just by documenting your journey, right, on social, you're building a brand, right? Just by you doing that. I mean, this is not, you might buy a camera or something, right? But by you doing this, actually, like the cost of this is nothing. Marketing costs money, right? You have to spend money on marketing, right? But branding, right? Branding is kind of like a shortcut to marketing without spending money, right? At some point, you got to get a little wiser, a little more intelligent on how you're going to leverage your branding into actual case acquisition. But if you're starting off, you need you need to only worry about pumping out content, right? You need to worry about pumping out content. So branding is not going to cost me much money, right? I'm focusing more for 2021 on, again, building my firm, getting more cases, hiring more people, and I'm in this interesting time in my business where I need to really build out the infrastructure. I need to build out the systems. I need to build out the procedures and the processes so that it'll be easier for me to scale.
I love that. I love that so much, because right now, that is exactly what I was working on last week. And I'm like, what are my systems, right? Because to me, the idea of a truly successful practice is one that can operate independent of me.
Absolutely.
How do I get that there? And I think that's so important, because when you identify your strength as a business person, right? I don't know if I have a strength as a business person, but I am finding the strategy And the tactics considerations, super fun, actually. Like I would have never expected that, right? But you've now identified yourself as a business person, which means you would have had to delegate certain tasks to open up your space to be able to do what you're strong at, right?
Yeah.
So what do you delegate? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, again, something that is not easy to do. It's something that takes time to figure out.
Like, how do you know when you need to hire, the case manager, the paralegals, the CEOs, the, whatever the rules are in your firm?
Two things. It's where are you now and where do you want to go?
Okay.
I think
do you start at the end and work backwards? Meaning, this is where I want my firm to be. Now, here's the steps I need to get there.
That's what I'm starting to do. Even today in the shower, I was like, all right, for me to do an annual revenue of X means that I have to have, 500 cases a year that settle at Y. You know what I'm saying? Like you gotta have that vision. And I didn't know this when I started my practice. I didn't think I didn't know what I was doing when I started my practice.
Quick shameless plug because I do a lot of work in the mindset. We talked about this, right?
Yeah, we did.
I do a lot of work in the mindset arena, and but my thoughts are disorganized. I'm all over the place. It's probably single mom syndrome, lawyer syndrome, like business, I dreaming big, all that. So what I did, I don't know how many people follow Rachel Hollis. She's kind of a female motivational entrepreneurial thing. But I read a book called Girls Stop Apologizing, and it talks, have you read that? Oh my God, you've got to read this book. I'm going to bring it for you next Tuesday. I'm going to force you to read this book so we can talk about it. So it talks about basically going to the space of where you want, like what is your big dream? Like see it, visualize it, feel it, all of that. Then you create the mile markers on how to get there, which is your roadmap. And then you break it down into small chunks, right? So for example, you want a firm that has 50 employees, you want so many paralegals, you kind of figure out what the payroll for that would be, right? So it's doing the hard work. And then you figure out what you need to bring in every month to do that. And she's huge on habits and morning rituals. So every morning I get up at 4 a.m. before my kids get up so that they don't interrupt the process. And I use these two. I totally did not bring this on purpose. This was just coincidental. I start every day with a gratitude journal, right? So I remember what I'm thankful for, and it has to be gratitude within the last 24 hours, right? So if my son says something super funny, I make a mental note and then I write that down. Like I've been trying to get him off of TikTok. It has filters, it's appropriate, but he recently told me that he should not be removed from TikTok because TikTok is the solution to happiness. The next day I was grateful for that comment. And I have this, which is the Keep Dreaming journal. And it literally every month you have to write out, like it forces you to build time into your crazy schedule to figure out how you're going to hit those huge mile markers, and achieve that goal. Right. So I did. And I recently reached out to Brett and I was like, hey, this is what I want to hire. Like, can you kind of give me some guidance on what I'm going to be looking at in terms of paying them so I can figure out how much revenue I need to be bringing in every month? Because I don't have the benefit of, starting out with no wife and kids. I'm actually, never mind. I'm just going to leave that comment alone. I've got the kids part and they are effing expensive. So I can't keep my living expenses as minimal as I would like to. But I think that when you were talking about figuring out what you need and then pulling in those steps, that's what this stuff is about creating that roadmap to where you want to go. So I know some solo practitioners who have literally have themselves and one assistant, and they've done that for 30 years and that's all they want. And that's cool. Like you do you, right? I want something a lot bigger. I know exactly what role I want to end up playing in my firm. I know I'm going to need a lot of help to get there. And I'm definitely, I love trial work. I will never abandon that because it's in my blood. But eventually at some point, I do want to work on marketing and the business. And you and I talked a lot about that, and you really got my blood boiling when it comes to that. You started giving me like all kinds of crazy ideas. I lost a little bit of sleep, but I came up with a lot of innovative stuff, so thank you. But talk about that. Like, talk about, because we talked about mindset, and I know some people don't want to hear it, but I think it is so important. How do you go from being in law school, jumping out there, and I mean, you did what it took me years to get the courage to do. You started a firm from nothing, no cases, no leads, no experience, and now you've built it up to where you have employees that you can delegate the tasks to so that you can do what you do best. What did your mindset look like for you to be able to do that? What was your strategy? Meaning, did you say, okay, I want to have this amount of paralegals, I want to have this amount of case managers, I want to have this number of associate attorneys, and then how did you strategize how you were going to get to that point so that you could focus on what you were strongest at? And that was a really long compound question. For all the attorneys, save the objections. I already know it was objectionable, but I think you got where I was trying to go.
I mean, this is a really, really great question, and honestly, I'm extremely fascinated by this. Like, I love talking about the practice of law. I love talking about the business of the practice of law, or just the business in general, right? I mean, usually when you listen to podcasts and stuff like that, it's like you're talking to people who made $500 million and they've had a 30-year career. It's cool to hear from people like you, Ashley. It's cool to hear from people like me, I think, because we're talking as we're doing it. Like, we're learning from each other. I've learned so much from some of my colleagues who are just like 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead of me, right? So I think it would be easy for me to say, like, yes, I had a plan, right? I had my 5-year plan, I had my 10-year plan, and I reverse engineered it, and I followed it to a T. It would be a very romantic way for me to tell you that's how I did it.
Okay.
It's not how I did it at all, okay?
Okay.
And I think that that's okay, all right? Because like I said, when I started, I didn't really know what I was doing. But the important thing is that I started.
Yep.
The important thing is that I did it.
You took the first step, right?
I took
Okay.
About 2-3 years into my practice, I was like, shit, I still really don't know anything. And did I make a mistake? Like, should I have worked for the Simon Law Group, even if they probably wouldn't hire me? Should I have worked for, like, Alder Law? Should I have worked for somewhere and learned how to do what I'm doing and then started my practice? And then I had this really interesting epiphany, which is, if I didn't start when I started and how I started, I wouldn't have built the foundation of my business. I wouldn't have built the blueprint of my business, right? You're always going to find something that you don't know, whether it's in law or in business or whatever, okay? Just because you don't know it doesn't mean you can't learn it and doesn't mean you can't do it, right?
So let me ask you something about that, though. Every time, because this is what's happening for me, and the guy, he married Sarah Blakely, the creator of Spanx, and
Spanx.
Yeah, but her husband, and he does this like Mount Everest climb every year. He's got a bunch of businesses. I'm blanking on his name, but he said the reason so basically he picks a mountain, he rents a mountain, I kid you not, and it's supposed to be the same feat as Mount Everest, and people will pay and go on this journey and climb it. And the reason he does that is he says that every time you do something that made you uncomfortable and you overcome it, you raise your baseline. Your baseline never goes down. So when you coming out, you saying, maybe, I didn't know how to do this, but I could learn how to do it. Every time you did that and something made you uncomfortable and you overcame it, did it give you more confidence to take the next step? And did it raise your baseline?
Look, every time I hired an employee, I freaked out. And the reason why I freaked out was, what if they, don't like it here? What if they feel like they don't have the right mentorship or training or resources? And then that kind of even escalated when I started hiring. I had 3 attorneys who work here now. So when I hired my first attorney, I was really panicking, like the night before she started working for me. I never, I barely know what to do as a lawyer, let alone, managing somebody and stuff like that. So every time I did like something as simple as hiring somebody to my firm, I would, kind of freak out,
What
right?
was your
And
freak
then
out?
one, huh?
What was the fear that was in your mind?
Again, the fear was, I don't want to call it that I had any like, it wasn't self doubt. It wasn't that. It was just like, what if like they don't like it here, right? What if they find something like really wrong with the business? What if they don't like the cases? What if they don't like, there's just so many things that I thought
Did
about,
you ever
right?
worry that you couldn't afford them?
Oh, I worry about that. Hey, look, right now is a really crazy time for me because I've increased my business a lot by the amount I spend, right? And I've increased my business amount by the amount I spend for marketing and the amount that I spend for um, my payroll. Like I look at my payroll now. I'm like, how did it get to this? Like, it's kind of like, where did I go wrong? But it's not
Right.
where did I go wrong. Like,
Right.
this is what needs to happen when you grow, right?
Okay.
And especially with COVID right now, right? So cases aren't settling as easily as they were, and I'm
Right.
sure a lot of people can identify with what I am going through, right?
Yes.
So this is another reason why you need to have a bankroll of money, because as plaintiffs lawyers, our money flow, our cash flow is not necessarily consistent. It's not. Sometimes we have great months and sometimes we have terrible months, right? So you need to have that bankroll of money, especially when you're going through a period of growth, right? To be able to sustain and weather the storm. Like, can you have 2, 3, 4 months where your costs are more than your revenue, right? And of course, there are some months that just completely wash away the last 3 months that weren't so good, right? So like, yeah, somebody said the fear of the unknown, right? How are people going to react to me being the leader, or me being the manager, or me being the operator? Are the attorneys not going to like it? I mean, they work for people like, Ashley came from Alder's office. They work for people like Alder, or my employees work for, established employment firms, like the Carney Shigarians and stuff like that. Like, that's where they come from. They come from my mid-tier, mid-sized law firm. Are they not going to like it? So to kind of emphasize your point, there is so much shit that you do as even a lawyer or a business person where you're not comfortable. But once you do it once or twice or 5 times, you start getting not only comfortable with it, but you start learning how to do it well and do it better, right? So whatever it is that you're scared of, you're only scared of it because you haven't done it yet,
So are
right?
you saying take the risk, jump into the unknown, and learn from it no matter which way it goes?
Yeah, I mean, look, do a reasonable amount of assessing the risk. Do
Yeah.
a reasonable amount of assessing risk. Don't think about it too much. Do a reasonable amount of assessing the risk and do it, right? One person I learned a lot about business and marketing and just, psychology from is Gary Vaynerchuk. And I remember like losses, right? We
I
dwell so
love
much.
that dude. I
He's
love
the
him.
best.
Yeah.
We dwell so much on like losses, whether it's business or even personal stuff, and it's like, do not think about it so much, right? It happened. The loss happened. Okay, move on. But some people, they think about their losses. They think about something they did wrong. They think about a case they fucked up. Think about it for an hour. Think about it for 5 minutes. Think about it over a weekend. But don't let that bring you down. You need to look to the future. Don't look in the rearview mirror.
I
Right?
just
You need
had
to
this, I'm
look to the
laughing
future.
because you're so right on. And I literally had this conversation with my 9-year-old son in the dugout on his baseball field on Sunday. I'm like, you struck out. Okay, I get it. It's disappointing. Everybody strikes out. What are you going to do? You're going to spend the next 30 seconds figuring out why you struck out, and then the next time you go up to bat, you're going to go up there with the same attitude you did the first time, and you're going to kill it. And he did.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh my gosh, like, because usually that stuff tanks him, right? We
Yeah.
internalize those losses, we internalize the fear, and I think the difference between some attorneys and GHQ attorneys, or the GHQ attorneys, were like, you know what? We're going to do it anyway. We're going to recover. We the attorneys that are in the think tank group, we're here for a reason because we are entrepreneurs. This is what we do. We assess the risk, we take the risk, we jump in the unknown. We're constantly raising our baseline. We all want, it's like what Harvey, oh my God, the character from Suits.
Harvey Specter.
Most people like this. I like this, right?
Here's the thing, Ashley.
We like this.
the people that you look up to or deem successful, they've had more losses than you.
But that's the only way you learn. They
That's
say
the only way
that
you
they
learn.
talk about the basketball athletes that they're like, yeah, he scored so many baskets, but you have no idea how many shots he missed
Right.
in his entire career.
Yep, 100%.
We only really hear about all the trials that, you know, attorneys win big verdicts on. We don't hear about all their losses. That was a push I made on Slack. I'm like, hey, let's get honest with each other.
Let's get honest with each other. Absolutely.
You know?
So I think a lot of people have a fear of the losses, right? And look, that's something that I think we all struggle with. We all are like, hey, look, like I'm scared to do something new or this or that because I'm whether it's conscious or subconscious, we fear that we're going to fail. We fear that we're going to lose. So what we need to do, and this is getting cliche, but it's so important, something that I wish we all heard when we were growing up, is you need to embrace the failure. You need to embrace the failure, right? Because that's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to get better. I mean, listen, if I look at everything that happens in any given day in my practice in my life, there are so many failures. There are so many failures. I need to think about them for 1 second, okay? And even if I don't think about it, that experience is ingrained in my mind, which makes me much smarter and much more wise when I come across the same issue in the future.
But that's called perspective, right?
A lot of it is perspective.
It's perspective because COVID is perspective, right? When things happen in my life, like those things, before I invested in a fantastic therapist in Redondo Beach, those things used to literally tank me. Like things would suck my energy out. I'd be done for the rest of the day and then I'd have to recover. Now that stuff doesn't happen to me anymore because if something happens to me, I've got a negative interaction with a client, case liability goes south, something scares me, I've got a nasty defense attorney who just wants to be a jerk just because he gets some kind of power trip off of it. I look at these things totally different now. I look at them like, what am I supposed to be learning? This is a reason. I believe in not to get all crazy, I believe in universal energy, so not a whole lot scares me because I don't think I'm meant to fail, right? But I do believe that we all have personal accountability, and I choose to look at things with a different perspective. You lose a trial, okay, I would have learned 10 times more from that loss than I would have learned if I had won, right?
100%.
And when it really matters, I'm going to be the woman in the arena winning the bigger verdicts because I learned from the losses, but they didn't tank me. You don't let that stuff tank you is what I'm hearing from you.
I don't let it tank me, but here's the thing: is it took me a lot to get to have this mentality.
Okay.
2 things I will say. One is when I assess a situation, I think to myself, what is the worst that could happen, right? I think to myself, what is the worst that could happen? When I realize what the worst could happen is not that bad, that actually makes me feel confident and comfortable and realize that I should actually take the risk. Like I started investing in the stock market. I started to invest my money in other places, and I'm being careful. But what's the worst that could happen? Yes, losing that money would suck, but the upside, I'm interested in the upside. Can I stomach the loss?
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
Right.
Can I stomach that?
Yeah.
Can I stomach the worst that could happen? If I can, and it's not going to be detrimental to my health or my family's health, and I can learn from that, and that's going to level me up in some aspect of my life.
Yep.
And that's something I'm going to do. Another thing is, what you said about perspective. Oh my God, it's everything. It's absolutely everything.
I have one more question for you because I realize I'm 4 minutes over into everybody's schedule.
Let's do it.
This is a conversation I just had with another lawyer yesterday. I believe that you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. If you want to level up there is no separation between your personal life and your professional life. Sorry, my kid keeps calling. There's no separation. You can't have a personal life that's a total disaster and expect to take your professional life to its A game. It all is related, okay?
Sure.
So I'm very conscious about who I allow in my circle, and I'm like, when I got off the phone with you, I was very surprised that I was not exhausted, and that is when I was like, wow, I am really sensitive to people's energy, right? And then I have a conversation with somebody else, and I'm like, I don't feel so good after that conversation. I'm very careful who I let in my circle because I want to have a positive effect on other people to level themselves up, but it works the same way. You got to have a positive effect. You personally had a very positive effect on me, and I was like, yes, Jake is the kind of people I'm trying to surround myself with. Do you follow that philosophy, and does it work for you?
100%, both in life and in, people that I listen to on podcasts, books that I read, people that I follow on Twitter, right? So in life, I do that with other people who are in the same industry as me. I look up to certain people in PI or plaintiff's work where I'm like, I need to be around you because you have great ideas, you're really smart. And also in life, like my people who are leveling up in other industries, like I definitely subscribe to that. And one thing that's important, I think, for people to know, Ashley, is that if you have somebody in your life that's like toxic or dramatic or something, that's going to negatively, as important it is to be around the positive people and the people who level you up, right? It's as equally important to get rid of the people that are toxic and negative and are detrimental to your mentality and your way of life. And unfortunately, like you gotta assess your group of friends or the people you surround yourself with, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, your group of friends or whoever it is. If there is somebody that's kind of bringing you down, that can affect you way more than somebody who's bringing you up, right? So you got to be really mindful and cognizant of that and make sure that you have a very comfortable space to operate in. Okay?
Amen.
I think that's super important.
Amen. Jake, man, thank you for bringing the fire today.
Yeah, no, Ashley, thank you so much. I'm very inspired by you. I think what you got going on here is really, really awesome. I think this idea is great. And I think that you are, I just want to be friends with you.
I want to be friends with you too. So don't talk about my friend like that. Don't tell me you haven't. You're nobody big. You're big. You're big to me.
Hey,
you're big to us. You're big to JHQ.
Being a little self-deprecative is actually it's healthy for me. It's healthy for me, especially in negotiating.
Okay.
When you can make fun of yourself, that means nobody else can make fun of you.
All right. Okay, guys. Right. I hope you all got as much out of this think tank as I did. We are going to continue the fun next Tuesday, and I look forward to seeing everybody then. Thanks for tuning in. Bye,
awesome.
Guys. Bye.
Thank you, Ashley. Bye-bye.